Welcome back to Stu's Structures. I am Mark Stewart, and we're here to continue our build on the Beanery with this video number 18 in this series, so stay tuned. So in this segment of the build, we're going to continue on with everything we've been working on. I'd like to get the hotel walls for the second hotel building back, go ahead and cut and maybe work towards getting them to the point we can put them together, working more on the cornice work to the first hotel building that we put together in the last video. Maybe go ahead and get some windows and doors mounted in that structure. I'd like to continue on with working on the roofs for building number 4 back there. Remember, there were 2 individual roof cages and supports that we previously put together. I'd like to go ahead and get the roofing on those and the standing seams completed on those. And there's other little details which I showed you a few little parts of before, but there's some other stuff that we need to work on to go ahead and add detail to this building. I'm going to hold off on weathering. I'm not sure how much weathering I'm going to get into right now. But right now we've got plenty of other things to work on. So we're going to get started on that and see how far we get. So here we go. The first thing I want to do is come back to this first hotel building that we started on. I'm adding this filler of styrene just to this wall. Most of this won't be seen. I wish I had done the second story in brick, because between the 1-story building that you'll see later on in between the 2 hotel buildings and the overhead walkway, a little of this might be visible. I'm not really sure how much will be. We'll see later. But anyway, I want to come back and work some more on the cornice work on this. So I measured for my strips to go on top of the wood cornice that I have there, and cut a bunch of these strips in 2 sizes. Remember, these step out on each layer. There's 2 layers. So I'm gluing the first layer here, and it just steps out from the wood underneath just a tiny little bit, about 3 inches in HO scale or so. And I do both ends first, and that way I can come back and do the 2 sides and measure them into where they meet that and get good tight joints in it. So here's the first layer all completed, and this is just like the cornice that we did for the other building. Really, we're just doing the same exact process all over again. And then once this first layer is done, I come back and I start with the second layer, just the same as the first, except for this one steps out another 3 inches in HO scale again. So it just sticks out and leaves the space behind it for the gutter. And under the bottom edge, there's a tiny little trim piece that needs to be installed. So I just cut a whole bunch of these real thin strips off some sheet basswood that I had, and just added them clear under the very bottom edge. And then once that's done, that's the whole corners completed except for painting. And this is just a shot of that. There's a little bit of green putty filler in the corners. I still need to sand down in this shot a little bit, but basically that's pretty much done. Then I came back and went ahead and installed the windows and doors in this building, and just got all them seated. We still have to put the styrene in them and work with the shades and stuff later on, but that's just one more step that this building is towards getting completed, where we can add it to the other building. Then the next thing is to come back and paint the cornice. Basically I probably, the trim piece I probably should have pre-painted before I glued it on, and this very edging that's really tedious right next to where it meets the brick would have been a little quicker. I also tried 2 or 3 different brushes. I have a lot of old brushes that half of them probably need to be thrown out. So I tried 2 or 3 brushes before I found one that I really liked. And once I get the trim done, I can come back with a little wider brush and just work everything into all that. And then once all that's painted, that's one more step done. So here's the cornice done, the windows and doors done. So this building, is coming close to completion. The corners where the brick meet, I'm not going to worry too much. There's a gutter that comes right down the very corner of the building, which will hide most of that. So I'm not really too worried about that. And we're going on and cutting the rest of the walls for this other hotel. And you can see in between the two hotels there's this one-story building that goes in here as well. So we're going to cut those walls and then all 4 walls for the next hotel building back behind, and then that'll be all our walls for the whole building finally cut out and ready to work with. And also on the back of the building you see a staircase on the back of it. We also are going to add that in. But here's the 2 one-story walls for, in between the hotel on both sides of the building. One wall will have to get a little window in it, but I'm just cutting out basic plastics for all the walls right now. So here's the plastic for that, and then we come back and cut the pieces for the 2 end walls. And the other building was 30 feet. These are a little more narrow than the other building. These are only 25 feet across for the end walls on this building. That makes the windows and everything a little tighter on this building, but that's the way it was. So once we glue those 2 pieces together, then we have the 2 end walls ready to rock and roll. And on this building again, I learned from the previous 3-story structure before that I cut the seams so that the windows don't fall where the overlapping plastic is. And I'm going to do the same filler wall for in between the 2 hotels that I did on the other hotel building. So I cut this piece out as a filler and go ahead and glue it in place in the big opening that won't be seen. I get a little stingy with brick. The brick and stuff's expensive when I buy a lot of it at a time. I'm just kind of stingy, so I just use this cheap plastic for filler instead. And then I just put the windows on and scribe marks next to them with an X-Acto blade, come back with my Dremel and cut a hole where every one of the windows and doors will be. And then I use this nibbler here to come back and nibble all the openings. And that hole I drilled is just big enough for the nibbler to stick up through and then start nibbling out all the openings. So then I come through in every one of those holes and cut out all my windows. It's really close to the final outline of the window. And then I basically come back with a file and just finish off the corners and the edges and make everything nice and square and clean so that the windows will fit in there nice and snug. There was a couple of these I got a little bit crazy with, so I'm going to have to do a little bit of filling on a couple of them with some glue and do some paint work around a couple of them. I mean, it's really minor, nothing you may really see that much. And I went ahead and processed the last of the doors and windows for this whole building. Like I said, there's over 100 windows in this building and quite a few doors. So now we've got everything painted. We'll have to clean the outer edges where they glue into the building, but just a rattle can and paint. Cut the rest of the styrene out of packaging material for the rest of the windows. Some stuff to cut them down to size, but at least I got all the basic cutting done of the packaging and got the styrene, clear styrene for the windows cut, and all the pieces that I'll need to do that with. Now there's a couple of stairways on this. Here's a picture of that bridge that goes in between the 2 buildings. I think I'm going to raise the height just a little bit to give good clearance for the model trains that are going to be going underneath of it. But off this side, it's hard to see it, but there's actually a staircase that goes down on the outside of the building. And there's these support stanchions on the left side there. You see 1 stanchion, and then on the right side there's 2 stanchions across a platform before it crosses the railroad tracks. So we need to look at those stanchions. And here's the only lower part of that staircase on that other side that I have any picture of at all, but it definitely comes down in midway through that building on that side. Now I think what I'm going to do is I have a couple of these off an overhead walkway from years ago, and I think I'm just going to butcher these and make that staircase that comes down the outside of that wall from the overhead walkway on that side. So I'm just going to take this here and basically cut all the pieces apart out of it. The upright stanchions I can use for the main supports for the overhead bridge itself. And then the staircase, I can cut up the 2 pieces and glue the 2 halves together to where I can make one nice long staircase that can come down along that side of the building. I'm not sure if I'm going to leave the handrails on there and use them. They're a little bit bulky, but we'll see about that. And then there's this staircase on the back of the building that's enclosed in wood. I'm going to go ahead and add that onto the building as well. And you know, I went ahead and laid it out on the structure and got to looking around, and I have these kits that come from they're made out of styrene from Evergreen. And I found this in my junk that I haven't used this in forever and forgot I even had it. But this isn't seen in that building. This makes a fairly nice looking stair kit in HO scale, but so I went ahead and laid it out in the back of the building. It barely clears the door down below, and I didn't want to interfere with any of the other windows or anything. So I went ahead and laid it out as close as I could to what it looked like it appeared on that building. And then just for right now, I went ahead and glued one of the stair treads in place where the actual stairs will go, mounted on the building itself, so I can go ahead and get some paint on some of that structure where it'll be seen, and work some more with the rest of the side of the building from that point. The next thing we're going to work on are the two roofs on the third building back. I remember I had the cages built before, so we're just adding the styrene to the top of them. It took me a long time to get some of these right. It was first thing in the morning, maybe I hadn't had enough coffee. But you can see there is a cutout on the end as well where it has to fit up underneath the other roof and meet that wall back behind as well. And it just, you know, it ended up being a little challenging. You can see here how it just slips up underneath that roof and onto the other wall. And you know, there has to be plenty of gutter space where the two roofs on the same building meet in the middle and on the sides and the ends as well. And I overcut all these sides and then put them in place and then cut them down to size to make them work. I didn't try to get everything right to begin with because I knew this was going to take some doing to get it right. But eventually it all came together and we got these done. You know, I pictured once before the down pipes for the gutter system. And this is basically how I work with those. I have a heat gun. This is probably a little hot. It does have multiple settings, and I use it on the lowest setting. I tried to work with little pliers to get these to bend, and I ended up just doing it all with my fingers, basically. It doesn't get that hot. But here's a picture of it's just a tiny, small little crook that goes on the top of each one of these to come out and meet underneath the gutter, and then it glues onto the corner of the structure. And you know, these would have been copper, so basically I have this bronze paint that I'm putting underneath on the pipes and then using a black wash on top of those so that just a touch of this shows through here and there, and it kind of looks like an aged copper pipe. Now, one thing that I'm adding to this building that I didn't have on are lights on the outside above the doors. And I'm using these Tichy lights, which are pre-molded. They have the bulbs molded onto them, but what I'm doing is cutting off the bulbs, then using my router with a little bit and routing out the concave area underneath and drilling a hole on the back side where they meet the support and adding these LED little tiny lights in there, and they're about the same size as a bulb in HO scale. So then I run the wires up through that tiny hole on the back side, glue it in place, and then we'll mount them later on over the doors. And here's just a shot at this point in time of, you know, kind of the whole building in place. I've never had everything all together. You know, this is all the structures that will form this building. You can see the area in between the two hotels where the walkway will go through there. You know, that walkway on the back of the building here with the stairs that come up to a second floor door. And you know, the third building's just taped together here and everything back there. But you know, we've got the roofs to work on. We've got a lot more work to do on this building. It is starting to come together really quick, and you know, I'm liking where this is going. And there you have another segment of Stu Structures and Building the Beanery. It's coming along really fast now. It's nice to see that final glimpse of the whole building in place together to kind of give you an idea of really how big this building is. This is HO scale, which most of you probably know, but you know, it's a big building. It takes up a lot of landscape on the model railroad. But it was an iconic building in Grafton, West Virginia, so it was right in the middle of a Y. There would have been passenger service on either side of that building, and a lot of the northern lines, as you're looking at the point of the building, would have went off to the right hand side to Fairmont, Wheeling, and northern routes, and the routes to the left sides, actually there's a at one time there was a Y there, now there's not, but it takes place on outside of town. But in the early part, when this building was built, there was actually a line that came in from southern West Virginia in that way, down along the Taggart Valley River where the dam is in place, and they've had to move the railroad now. And then the other line went directly west through Clarksburg and Parkersburg and across the Ohio, on into the Ohio State and that area that way, and on to St. Louis. So there was a lot of traffic. At one time there was about 28 passenger trains a day that went through Grafton. By that period the station had moved to a newer building, which we're going to construct later on in time. There's a bunch of other buildings I'm going to do prior to building that building. But in any case, it's nice to start getting some of these little details in place too. The little men inside the doors, there's 2 of those in place. Started to get the gutters on, some more of the roof on. In the next segment we'll continue on with working for roofs for the first hotel building back there, and get the cage built and supports for that roof. We'll continue working on chimneys, because there's a bunch of chimneys that go on through the next building. Maybe we can get the standing seams and the paint and chimneys on the roofs for the 4th building back there that we got put together this trip. Then the 3rd building, we got to continue on with the windows, doors, paint, brickwork, all that stuff on that building. Building the 2 separate staircases that go on this building. And then remember, in between those 2 hotel structures there's an overhead walkway that has a steel structure with wooden planks that would have crossed the railroads on either side. The people in Grafton used to walk from town across through this building, and on the other side, after it crossed over the railroad, actually went along the back side of the roundhouse. So you were walking on top the back of the roundhouse and downstairs on the other side, and then parallel to, well, it was on the same bridge as a railroad, and you walked along a path along that same bridge and crossed into the other side of town. That's how people got back and forth to town from that side of town. So this was a pedestrian thing, not a railroad crossing bridge. And a lot of people used it. A lot of shots of the railroad were taken from these overhead shots from various photographers down through the years, of a lot of trains going through that area. Anyway, so it was a nice building to build. I'm glad we're getting along to this point. It should start coming together quickly now, and we can get a good wrap on this without too many more segments. I've still got a few more segments to go. There's a lot of work still to do on this building, even though we've got to this point. So in any case, I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for coming back and sharing my videos with me and spending time model railroading with me. Like and share these videos, and down below is the subscribe button. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel and hit the little bell next to it, and then you get a notification when new videos come out. I do have a few odd things that I post besides building buildings once in a while, so you'll be notified when all those come out as well. And just enjoy the winter. Spend some time working with your trains or buildings. Build some structures. Jump out there and experiment if you've never done it before. Or just start with kit bashing a few structures that you have pieces of into a building, and start playing that way. It's very self-gratifying when you get to the point that you get a building done and it looks good, and you can put it on your railroad, and nobody else is going to have one like that. It's your building. So in any case, happy model railroading, and I look forward to seeing you next time.